Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, this is Attitude Magazine's ADHD Expert Series. I'm Susan Kaufman here for Attitude. Today we're talking about stress and resilience. It's that time of year, and as all of us know, we ADDers are especially vulnerable to setbacks. Our emotions run close to the surface, and we're often, I'd say, devastated by difficulties or by disapproval. Our guest today is Jodi Sleeper-Triplett, and she will be giving us specific tactics that ADDers can use to bounce back from stress or setbacks, ways to cope when the going gets tough. Jodi's a well-known ADHD coach in the field, a frequent contributor at Attitude. She has extensive credentials. She's a master certified coach, and she's one of the founders of the field of coaching, especially for young adults. She's the author of a book that we recommend, Empowering Youth with ADHD, but I think she's a generally really practical and helpful coach for all of us, youth and adults. So thank you very much, Jodi, for being here today. We're grateful as always. So with that, let me turn it over to Jodi and thank her again for the participation. We're grateful.
Thank you. It's good to be here. So today we're going to talk about the resilient ADHDer. How do you bounce back from stress and transitions in your life? And just to start us out, and we can go ahead to the next slide, is to give you just a quick definition of resiliency. Resiliency is the ability to recover quickly from setbacks. That can be really difficult for individuals with ADHD to do. Lots going on in your mind, the stress level is high, things happening around you, your environment could be changing. So in order to be resilient, I want to be sure that you have some tools that you can use. And the first one to get you started to be focused in listening to me and thinking about the questions that you want to ask is to take a deep breath. Just breathe in and breathe out. And feel free as I'm talking to continue to do that, to refocus yourself. That's how I get ready to do my training, my coaching, and the webinars. So the next slide, please. So shifting your mindset, what does that mean? Taking a moment to think about a situation, a stressful situation. Oh my gosh, I just burned dinner, or I left my computer at home and it has my project on it. How can you shift your mindset to looking at an opportunity or a new perspective on it? It's not easy in those two situations to think about the glass being half full. Now, when dinner burns, the rest of the family might think, well, the glass is half full because we get to eat out. You could joke about it. Guess what? It's a takeout night. Having an opportunity to think of a different perspective. What do you want to do differently next time? Being able to relax around the fact that it happened and be grateful that only the food burned and the kitchen didn't burn down. Now, that may sound funny, but it's the truth. When we think about how some things happen to us and how we can shift the way we think about it, rather than it being a problem, it can be an opportunity. It's an opportunity to eat out. When you forget your projects or papers at home, maybe it's an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to take a break at lunchtime and I'm going to go back and get that. It gives me a chance to get out of the office. Or to have a conversation with someone about some additional ideas that you'd like to add before you turn it in. So you're using your skills to talk to other people. There's always a way to shift your mindset. And Dr. Robert Brooks, and Sam Goldstein have written done a lot of work and written books on resiliency and shifting your mindset. And they're in the recommended books at the end of the slides for you as well. So think about that one. So you want to then think about, all right, you shift your mindset a little bit in order to build your confidence. What is it that helps us and would help you sort of in spite of your ADHD and executive functioning problems, anything that's going on that makes you feel less than confident about yourself. It could be a learning disability, that it takes longer for you to read something than someone else, whether it's a college student or you're in business, or even going back to school as later in life thinking, oh, I can't do that. Well, how do you build your confidence? Think about what you're good at. So there are two ways to do that. One is, what are you consciously aware of? What do you know that is part of your list of strengths or competences? So if you are competent, you might be a great speaker and communicator, but your reading skills aren't as good. However, you might do well with an audiobook or talking with someone and say, hey, it's harder for me to read the book. Could we have a conversation over coffee and talk about that? Because I'm really good at taking it in and having a conversation, dialoguing versus sitting down and reading the dry text. So you're thinking about, what are the things that I'm aware of that I do, and help to build your own confidence while you're doing that. Now, the flip side, or the additional piece to that, is digging deeper unconsciously. What are you really good at? Maybe it's time to ask other people, what do you notice about me that is good, helpful? What are some of the insights that you might have about me, whether that's a partner, a spouse, a boss, friends? Asking them to help you to remember, in the way that we do in coaching, is oftentimes people who come to coaching don't realize their strengths because there's so much focus on, I'm not confident, I'm not able to do things. And the way I look at it is that you're not able to do certain things yet. You have to build your competence and build your skills. But if you don't know that you're good at something, you might be the best person in the household to fix something when it's broken. And you don't think about it because you just do it naturally. But remember, that's a skill. You're the person I'm going to want to call when I need a light fixture changed, or when I need a lock on my door, or possibly even a piece broke off some furniture the other day. That's not something I can do. I'm not really good with my hands in terms of building and changing things. I'm better with a computer and typing and writing and talking. So we all have to look at what our skills are, because that can help you feel better and reduce your stress. So increase your self-awareness. What is it that bugs you? What stresses you out? Make a list of those things, not to bemoan them and to think, oh my gosh, everything stresses me out. It's to go through and think, well, gee, if that situation comes up, if I'm stuck in traffic, what can I do to feel better about it? What can you do to increase your self-awareness in those situations? Maybe you notice that you put on a CD, or you change the music. Deep breathing while you're driving, with your eyes open, please. That makes a difference. The more self-aware you are of what your triggers are to stress, the easier it is to shift that and avoid having that trigger continue. So it's very valuable to step back, be aware of your surroundings, what is the best for you. If you work in a certain environment and you enjoy it, if you have to sit in a certain type of chair, or you're better off having your headphones on or your earbuds in, listening to some type of music in order to help you focus when you work, that's about increasing your awareness of what is the best for you. And remember that if it's best for you, there's usually a way to negotiate that with the people that you work with, live with, are around on a regular basis, because we all want others to do well. And it's usually the hardest to ask people for something that we want for ourselves. But I encourage you to think about it, make notes about what it's like in your environment. What bothers you? Is there a buzzing fluorescent light, like the one that's in my office every so often buzzes? It drives me nuts. So I brought in a different light. I'm aware of the fact that that distracts me, so I use natural light, different type of light, and I'll flip off the overheads whenever I can. So it's finding out what is helpful for you and what creates your stress so that you can start to create that balance. So the other piece there is the transitioning to an unstructured environment. What happens when you transition for younger individuals from high school to college, which is unstructured in comparison, from one job to another? Maybe it's a promotion where you are in charge of more of your own work and the work of others, so that when the structure that was created by the person who was your supervisor is not as involved as before, you now have less structure and you need to figure out, how do I transition and what new structure do I need to set up? Changing relationships, that can feel out of whack, unstructured, because you don't know what to expect from the other person and what they expect from you. So learning about that can help you to make the environment more predictable, which is calming and easier. And it helps you to bounce back and be in a position of saying, okay, I have a sense of what's coming next. And that's really helpful for people with ADHD. Now imagine moving into a new house. I just moved into a new place about 7 months ago, and parts of the place are great, but we're still always looking for something because there hasn't been an opportunity to really put everything in its place. That's a very calming feeling when you get things put away. So a recommendation is, whether you're transitioning to the college environment, going to your first job, again, a relationship or a new home, enlist the help of other people. Find out what it will take for you to feel more comfortable, even if you can only do it in chunks. We designated a room in our home that has the stuff that's not unpacked yet, because it's a smaller house and we have to decide what goes in the attic, what do we give away, what do we keep. But rather than having that visual clutter, it's contained. That's a very calming thing for people with ADHD and their families. Time management and organizational skills. I'm just going to give you a tidbit on how this helps when you're stressed and again when you're in transition, that by knowing what you have to do, by having this structure, as much as many people with ADHD don't like structure and push away from it, it's kind of, I'll do it when I do it, don't pressure me, or I feel like I'm in a box. That box is actually your safety net. It's an opportunity to use those skills, whether you already have them and just don't enjoy using certain organizational skills or using a planner. Finding what works for you the best and tracking as closely as you can, even including time to exercise, to take care of yourself, to make sure that you are eating properly, that you're taking your medication. By balancing out and scheduling your time and organizing not only your stuff, but organizing your thoughts, that's a very calming, stressless process. And most of the people that I've worked with, the adults with ADHD over the years, have said, wow, it took a while the first time, but now I look forward to planning out my day and my week, and I actually can look ahead and see, where am I going to have free time to enjoy myself and do something that's completely different, that's not part of the regular work week or household chores or whatever it might be. And helping yourself or getting others to help you get organized is important. As I just said, having that space, we have a space where the boxes live, because that way we can live in the house without that being distracting or stress producing, because it's a stressor when I think, wow, I have all this stuff to do. So think about the different ways that you might do that, whether it's on your own or getting some help. So what are the life areas that would be helpful for you to consider? Self-care, exercise, eating properly, and I've said that a few times, you really do. Those two things are so important. What you put into your body, how often you eat, making sure you don't skip meals, and possibly do what's really recommended is 6 meals instead of 3, having breaks, or you can have a breakfast, a snack, lunch, a small snack, a protein snack to get your brain going, and then you have your dinner. And if you need a snack after your dinner meal, then once again, try to keep the sugar level down and the protein up. Sometimes even frozen yogurt with a few nuts thrown on it is better than some of the other things that you might grab for in the freezer or refrigerator. So you want to take care of yourself. Also, going back to the organization and time management, what times are you going to block out in order to take care of yourself? If taking a shower every day, spending time choosing your clothes, getting dressed, feeling good about how you look, feeling more self-confident, if that's going to decrease your stress level and is a good feeling for you, block that time out. I call it me time. That's a time for you and no one else. If you're managing your children and trying to take care of yourself, then figure out when do you need to get up to take care of yourself. What can your family do independent of you? Possibly more than you might imagine, so that you can take care of you. Getting enough sleep is another one. Turning off those electronics, making sure that you have some downtime before you actually go to sleep, because it will help you sleep and shut your brain down rather than have it racing all night. Relationships. What's the status of your relationships now, and how might you look at those in order to make those more enjoyable, improve your communication with other people, and work on skills or help others work on skills that they might not have or not at the level that you have, in order to better communicate with others, to have them understand more about you and vice versa. You want to know how people operate, what their learning style is, what's important to them, what really bothers them. And you want them to know that about you, because that's where we build solid relationships and have that good feeling about being around other people, rather than I can't stand noise, so I'm not going to hang out with those people, or I'm not going to go to the neighbor's barbecue because there's just too much distraction there and it's too much for me. Well, how might you explain that to the neighbor and find a spot at the barbecue that's not as loud? Maybe sitting inside, or asking if you could help do something in the kitchen where it's quiet, but you're still a part of the activity. Financial responsibility, the more you manage your finances, the better it will be. That's sort of a fact, but I do want to share that there are a lot of ways to get some help out there if you're having trouble, and be aware of your finances, because that's one of the biggest stressors that adults come to coaching for. Their taxes, their bills, everything being either late or they're not sure how to manage it. And self-advocacy. In any area of life, the more that you can advocate for yourself and feel comfortable and confident, the less stressed you're going to be. Knowing how to approach someone and get some help and make sure you get what you need can be really valuable in those times when you're transitioning. Let the new people you're living near or working with what works for you the best. So in fostering well-being, you want to think about your mind, your body, and your spirit. Consider what helps you to stay calm, to de-stress, and how you can do it in all areas. Connecting mind, body, and spirit. And spirit doesn't have to be religious. It's just about the feeling of what's around you. And if you are spiritual in a religious vein, go with that. If you prefer to just have a calm, quiet place, that's important, very important. So think of different ways to do that. There are lots of resources out there, mindful meditation, and those can be very, very helpful. So coaching helps by really going back over everything that I've mentioned, and it might be something that comes up in some of your questions, is that by using skills and strategies and helping you as a coaching client or a family member learn skills that you might not have yet, finding strategies, some of the ones we talked about, the deep breathing, managing your time and writing in when you're going to exercise, when you're going to go to the grocery store, what are you having for dinner, planning ahead, skills and strategies for working with other people. We can help you in coaching to really hone in on the skills and strategies that you need, help you provide a structure for yourself, and keep you accountable for that structure, and be there to support you in a very non-judgmental way. So it's a valuable benefit whether you're using a coach or you just think about how might you come up with skills and strategies and find someone in your life to hold you accountable. So I want to flip over to some of the questions now, since I know there are a lot of you out there. Susan, do you have some for me?
You know, Jodi, you have hit upon, I'm looking at the questions, you've hit upon so many of the topics that people are posting about: transitions, work stress, family relationships, that maybe a helpful thing to do first, folks, would be to ask you to tell the group what causes you the most stress in your life. I mean, that'll help us see sort of what you're all coping with, and it'll all maybe inform everyone. There are a number of questions, Jodi, which are not surprising in today's work environment, from people who really feel under stress on the job. Let me just read one of them, but it's not atypical. I've just been given a written warning at work. I have to finish all my overdue work by the end of the year, and if I miss one deadline, I'm going to be out of job. How do I even start under this stress? So here's the stress of the work, and then on top of it, you know, the stress of being given these performance goals. Do you have any thoughts for this person who is under a lot of work stress?
Absolutely. A couple of things come to mind immediately is that when you get a warning like this and you know that, wow, I have all this stuff in front of me, the first thing is to remember you are going to do the best you can. And part of doing your best might be to advocate for what you need in order to complete those tasks. Because oftentimes not speaking up, not advocating for yourself when you have that type of a deadline can be hurtful to you. And it's possible, I don't know the specific situation, that the supervisors who've given you this warning don't really understand where your difficulty is in getting things done. The other part, which a lot of people do, is to find someone to work with you and hold you accountable. So you set up that plan. What are you going to do? How long will it take you to do each piece of it? And hold yourself accountable, and also have someone else help you with that. Sometimes jumping into coaching is valuable, but when it's a crunch, and I'm probably adding more stress to this person and many of you, but when it's a crunch of 2 or 3 weeks, you want to do something that you can do quickly, maybe setting reminders every 15 to 30 minutes on your phone or on your computer that helps you to refocus. What am I working on? What am I supposed to be working on? So that you stay on track. Now, also, make sure you're taking those breaks, even if it's 2 or 3 minutes, to get up and stretch, breathe deeply, so that you can get back to the core of it. But plan it out first, even if it seems like a waste of time, and figure out a way to get those reminders coming in so that you stay on track.
Okay, Jennifer posts here that she wants to tell everyone about the State Service Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. She says she didn't find out about it until she was 33, and the service was really helpful in terms of focusing on a new, finding a new job. Speaking still about the workplace, a couple of people have said, they know what they need to work better, but they also know that they're not going to get it. It's not going to happen. How do they handle that? What do they do in terms of resilience in that situation? Tough one. Since
I'm a glass half full girl, I tell you, I have to wonder whether or not what you need is really out of your reach, and if it might be a compromise or a shift in what you're looking for in order to get some accommodation for that, for whatever those needs are. Do you have any specifics on the needs, Susan? Just curious.
She didn't say, no, but I think, I'm assuming, or you know what, I think it was an open plan, open cubicle situation. So noise level, motion, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And it is hard because in some environments, accommodations are not made unless you go to an ombudsman or human resources, and specifically show them. They want some level of documentation. That may be where an advocate or a coach could be helpful to you to find out, how do I most effectively go to the powers that be and ask for things? Because regardless of what the standard is, there are laws that if you're not taking advantage of them now, it can be very valuable to look at that. And there are some great resources out there, whether that's on CHAD or the National Resource Center on ADHD, through Attitude, to find out who might be of service to you.
One of the people who posted on this topic said her setup at the office is great right now, but they're moving to an open plan office shortly. And she really feels that she does not want to disclose that she has ADHD. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know some of our coaches have absolutely recommended to people that they do not mention ADHD, that instead they talk about what they need to do the job well. What's your thinking on how to handle advocating for your needs in the workplace?
Well, I believe it's a personal decision in terms of whether or not you disclose, and I'm not strong on one direction or another, but I will say that you always find, or I've always found, that asking for what you need rather than saying, I have ADHD, so I have to have this.
Right.
People who don't get it sadly assume that you're talking as if it's an excuse for you to get whatever you want, rather than saying, I find that it's really hard to concentrate when there's noise around me.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be okay if I used a headset, which is what I've done, or earbuds is what I've done in other places? In an open environment, it helps me to have something that blocks out people walking by. Would it be possible to turn the desk a little bit, or whatever it might be? Do you understand that I might need to get up and walk around a little bit in an open environment? Is that going to be disturbing to anyone else? So you're bringing it across as, this is something I need to do, but I also want to be conscious of the needs of others, so that it comes as a give and take rather than gimme, gimme, gimme. And
right.
That's not the intention when you're doing it, but it's how it sadly comes across. So present it as those specific things you need.
Okay, that's great. I want to turn to the household. Here's the poignant question here from Tina, who says that she's a 41-year-old woman who was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD a year ago, and as a result, her life just makes much more sense. She knows, what's happening, but her husband has really not been supportive. He still calls her lazy. She says that she's, holding on by a thread. She has two sons, both with ADHD, and she just doesn't find a way. She hasn't found a way to explain or to get support for the family for how hard transitions are. Holidays, parties, vacations, specifically, she's mentioned, how difficult these are. And then the second part of this question, which I think is also about ADHD emotions, is she tends to have more anger episodes, and we know this sort of bursts of anger also come often with ADHD. So it's kind of a two-part question, Jodi. Maybe it's too much, but you get the idea.
Absolutely.
I think it's a pretty typical situation for an ADHD mom or dad, who's ever in charge of the household.
Right, and I'm hearing a couple of things. Certainly, the transitions are very difficult. Absolutely, and when there are a few of you in the house, it's certainly what I'm hearing is that that you've tried to get your husband's support, and I'm wondering who else there might be, whether that's a family therapist, even your general practitioner, your family doctor, who might sit down and talk with your husband or with both of you. Certainly getting some family therapy or family coaching just around basics, but creating awareness for your husband is key to having that work. The other piece is if he is not willing or able to help in certain areas, where else can you go to get some support from friends, from if you meet some other people in an women's ADHD support group, you might find that can be extremely helpful, because many of the women who are diagnosed at this stage of life, and you're trying to juggle everything, and it's not that men don't have this, they do have the same thing, it's the level, as Susan said, who's running the household and everything else. It's that the chunk of responsibilities that are so diverse that the anger comes up, and oftentimes it's that depression that's starting to lift when okay, I understand what's going on with me, and there's anger directed sometimes even toward yourself, because it's like the frustration of finally knowing and not being able to move forward, as well as it being sort of an offshoot of the ADHD. And I would really encourage that if you're not currently working with a therapist, and you and your children can go to a family therapist and slowly find ways to bring your husband in, because this is something you don't want to do alone. And you shouldn't have to. There are support groups, there are counselors out there, and opportunities through different social service agencies to get low-cost help as well if you're not able to afford it.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, really want to support that view of get support, and if you can't get it in your household, find it where you can find it. A post here from an adult who owns a demanding business. He's really struggling to keep all the balls in the air at once, but he's feeling like he has to work full time, overtime, and that as a result his marriage suffers. Thinking of lack of attentiveness to his spouse and stress on the job. Do you have any suggestions for creating balance? I think the tendency to feel always under the gun is so ADD that it's his problem. While it relates to being owner of a small business, I think many of us can identify with it.
Absolutely, and I've actually coached many men who are in that position, whether it's their entrepreneurs running their own businesses or working for companies, and saying, how do I spend time with my family? Because my role is to keep my job and to make money or have my own business grow. So part of that is going back to figuring out how you use your time. And coaching, and it's not about just saying coaching's the only thing, but coaching is very helpful in setting up a plan. And also, if your spouse is not struggling with issues with ADHD, it can be helpful for the two of you. I've had some client families who sit together each week and they plan and take a look at what does your work week look like, and then build in some time with the family. And when you're at work dealing with the business and keeping the business going, figuring out what can you delegate to a part-time assistant or a virtual assistant, anything that you might be taking on because of the feeling of you're responsible for, because it's your business. And as a small business owner, I get that. It's tough, but that little bit of delegation, or knowing that what you're doing at 7 p.m. could actually wait until 8 o'clock the following morning, if that gives you that freedom to say, I'm now going to stop or go home and have dinner and be with my family, it's setting up those new rules for yourself, internally and externally. So I would encourage you to consult again with a coach. Another place that's great for that is SCORE, SCORE.org. There are SCORE groups around the country, and they're basically retired business professionals in different areas, and they will help you to figure out how to keep your business managed, where you might need some help, and looking at it both financially and in terms of your time. They're really wonderful, and it's free. It's free to all of us.
Wow.
I've used the Washington, D.C. area SCORE to decide, I want to jump my business to the next level. Is this going to work, or am I going to be flat out exhausted?
Right. Right.
And it's great. So that's another thing.
So reaching out and support just comes up over and over again. It makes sense.
And the planning as well, looking at what are you really doing with your time.
In terms of paper management, here's a note from Eric who says, I love my job as a school counselor, but paperwork is a huge part of my work environment. It is my enemy. What suggestions can you share with an ADHDer to help organize papers, piles, prioritize filing? I hope to take away some ideas to reduce stress and my sense of overwhelm. I think there's no question, but this even visually, paper is just unsettling.
It is, and I've worked with school counselors as well as teachers who are, the best, most creative and connected teachers and counselors in the schools are the ones who have most trouble staying organized and dealing with paper because you're so in tune to what your core job is. The paperwork is a part of it. What I have found, and as a counselor, you may have some specific guidelines around this, but in the schools, I've had teachers and others get parent volunteers to help them straighten up their paperwork, make file folders for them, shred things, or make copies of stuff in an area that's not confidential, obviously. If that's something that you can do, it's amazing to just ask one of the volunteers want work to do. And they're the ones who will come in for a couple of hours and do something. And typically, they're the parents who are very organized, who want to come in and help the best teachers and counselors be successful. So that's one strategy. Another is to remember that you are not going to tackle it all at once. And if you can make a decision, and this is not easy, and I'm sure there are over 300 people listening to this call right now and more later on, to choose what's most important. And I'm figuring, 90% of you are saying, oh gosh, she's asking us to choose. And I know that's hard. So considering your time and the schedule of the school, working with your students, look at how you could prioritize getting certain things put away, filed, shredded, forms that need to be filled out. What's the most important by date and time and deadline? And that can help you to realize that the backlog of paper is something that you're going to have to schedule in. Typically, if you can find an hour a week to start with. I've had people do they've gone through and gotten help from other teachers and counselors who are really good at it, picking their polar opposite in terms of those skills, and they help each other with different things. But if you are doing this yourself, do it slowly, pick a chunk, and sort it out with a Post-it note so that you know what you're sorting instead of thinking, oh, I don't know what that pile was, and you avoid having to go back to that pile again. And keep that going for, as I said, about an hour a week. If you can do it twice a week, that's great. And start to sort them, and then you're going to have a better sense of what you need to tackle first. But just randomly grabbing a bunch of papers and starting to put them away and throw them away without a sense of a plan can be very frustrating. So I would encourage you to plan it out before you start.
Jodi, are you a believer in the timer strategy? You can do anything for 15 minutes, or you said, an hour twice a week, or something like that, as a way to address a backlog of filing. Or there's another person on the webinar who has 50 boxes that need to be sorted. I mean, it's a little more extreme than just paperwork, but as a way to tackle that. When you say plan it out, does a schedule make sense?
A schedule makes sense. A time timer, or using, a smartphone alarm. You can set it for every 15 minutes to give yourself a moment to think, where am I? Am I sitting down and reading something from the boxes, or am I actually continuing to sort? Because you want to make sure your attention is refocused. But don't spend more than an hour at a clip with breaks. Because it can be very emotionally draining. Now, with the 50 boxes, I just want to say that that's where it's very valuable to bring in someone who's good at that, whether it's somebody that you know and you can barter, with them, or a professional organizer who is part of the of NAPO, NAPO.net, the National Association of Professional Organizers, and there's a group that specializes in the chronically disorganized, people who really are struggling to get their papers taken care of. They understand ADHD, and there's also, if you've not heard of FlyLady, FlyLady.net, just like it sounds, FLYLADY. She has she's on Twitter, but she posts things on FlyLady, little tips, and you can also set yourself up with FlyLady to get your things done and have reminders come up, and it's a nice little service.
I think the FlyLady is great. Yeah, she's very big on timers. Tackle anything for 15 minutes. You can do it. I mean, she throws a lot of information at people, and sometimes it's too much for some folks, but it definitely has got helpful strategies. So, yeah, thanks for that suggestion.
Sure.
Interesting questions about motivation. There's a person here who says that I am a single mom with ADHD and 2 kids with ADHD, and so I've got stress all the time. But I find the stress gives me the energy and the motivation to get things done. I'm trying to reduce stress, but I'm also worried that without the stress, I just won't have the energy or the motivation to get things done. Another person has said, what about not having the will or the mood to do things? How do you do that? So a couple of questions there. And others have said, well, these ideas sound great, but if I had the motivation to do them, I wouldn't have the problem. So how do you address these motivational questions?
Yeah, and sometimes what we think is about motivation is more about fear of getting started, lack of skill. So digging in and identifying and thinking to yourself, if you want to do it, but you're not motivated to do the steps that it takes to complete something, then how can you chunk it down into smaller pieces? Because sometimes having little tiny pieces to do that seem like ridiculously small, that's where you want to be, because it's not ridiculous. It's not silly to break things down into 20 steps instead of 10 steps, because if you can get the tiny ones done, as you move along, you're going to see progress and feel progress. So that's an important piece. It's the old saying, don't bite off more than you can chew. Go with the small pieces, and that will help to give you a sense of, wow, I actually looked up the phone number of the place that I need to call, and tomorrow I'm going to make that call. Not having to look it up and having it right there, it's like, well, no excuses because it's right in front of me. So it's taking those small steps and applauding yourself in between. The other piece is deciding, if you don't have what you consider sort of the will or the motivation to do it, how important is that task? And if you're not sure, think about ways to make it more valuable to you. Like, what do you get? Many of us, and adults with ADHD especially, when you think about all the negative tapes that run through your head, think about the positive. What is the value? What are you going to get for completing a task, rather than, if I don't do this, everybody's going to be upset with me, or I must do it. It's like, when I do this, I'm going to feel good, or it will make somebody else very happy. So by shifting it that way, you can help yourself to have a reason to move it forward. And it is that shift that we talk about, that sometimes it's the skill, often it's the size of the task, and the other is, what is the benefit to me in doing this, or the benefit to other people? Now, I want to go to that piece about the stress and not wanting to reduce stress because stress keeps you going. The adrenaline keeps you going. The panic gets you going. It's at midnight I start my homework for a lot of the teenagers I work with, because they know, oh my gosh, in 2 hours I'm probably going to be asleep and I need to get it done. And they pull it off. They get it done in that period of time, or they pull an all-nighter and say, well, it's fine, I did it. But think about it this way. You can replace stress with dopamine and norepinephrine and get your brain moving forward, get that energy and that adrenaline going through exercise. So if you exercise more, which reduces the stress but clears the brain and gets the brain chemistry and the blood flowing, you will have the energy and the drive to do what you're doing without the stress. And that's an important shift.
All right, that's great. We're unfortunately running short on time. I want to address parenting for a moment, because while most of the top subjects have not been about parenting, there have been some. I have a 10-year-old ADHD child. How can I get out of the house without him yelling, "I don't want to go"? And another person, my 9th grade son, is so overwhelmed by high school that he just wants to drop out. How can he overcome the constant stress of failure? So these are parents who are looking for help dealing with stress, the stress that their children are feeling in life.
Yeah, and it's tough. Now with the 10-year-old, if you have a what I would consider a behavior plan or a chart, so that there are always incentives. So you have, what we call positive and negative reinforcements, positive consequences, negative consequences. A great book for the parents of a 10-year-old would be Sharon Weiss's From Chaos to Calm. Set up a table or a chart and help your child see that by going with you cooperatively, there will be something. It's not a bribe. It really is an incentive to learn how to be more cooperative, to be less oppositional in those situations, and giving a lot of praise and doing your best. It's hard, but do your best to ignore the negatives. There's a lot. I know we only have a few minutes. There's a lot that I could go on about, how we can help our children to shift. But I'd say part of it is looking at the positives versus the negatives, and not buying into, I'm not going to go, and being as firm as you can with a structure and positive reinforcement. For the ninth grade, for the overwhelmed 9th grader, and I apologize if I'm talking a little fast, I want to get this answer in.
Thank you.
For the 9th grade overwhelmed child, I would say take a look at what is on your child's plate. Find out if a coach would be helpful. Coaches, I know for a fact, coaches work very well with that age group. It could be a matter of chunking down the work. And once again, it's the same as with adults. Take a look at what's there and plan it out. When will there be time for free time, exercise, sports, friends, as well as the schoolwork? And if there isn't someone at school who can help, some systems have them and some don't, look outside of that and see if there's a possibility, whether that is someone who works solely on academics or an ADHD coach who works on all life areas. Because at that point in time, as parents, we want to start stepping back from doing that for our kids.
Okay. You've raised you've advised coaching, and I think everyone's interested in knowing more. So maybe in our last few minutes, you could talk about, how do you find a coach? How much do they cost? That comes up very frequently. What questions do you ask a potential coach? Any advice you might have to people who are interested in coaching and don't really know how to get started?
Okay. Well, to find a coach, there are a number of resources. Attitudes Directory is one. The Edge Foundation, and are you putting these in, Susan, so people will have them to refer to? There's edgefoundation.org. Attitude. You can also go, the member organization that we have for professional ADHD coaches, people who have been trained, is the ACO, the ADHD Coaches Organization. Now, you can find coaches out there. You can go to the different places that credential coaches, like the International Coach Federation, but they don't credential us as ADHD coaches. That's something we're working on separately. But you can find a coach who says they specialize in ADHD, and then you want to ask all the questions. How many people have you worked with? What's your training? Now, there's a full list of how to find a coach, the best way, what you want to know about them, and they're actually on my website. It's a PDF you can just pull off, and it's there as a service to the public because that's a really big piece of it, and I appreciate that people are asking, how do you know what questions to ask? You want to make sure that they are trained, that they have some experience. Cost is going to range, depending on where you live, anywhere, I'd say, from $250 or $300 a month to about $500 a month. So most coaches land around $400 when they have training, and what that means, it's about $100 a week, not a half hour or whatever, because when you're getting ADHD coaching, you are looking at a coaching session plus email check-ins, text messages, whatever it takes to hold you or your child accountable on a regular basis. So make sure that you find a coach who's going to give you what you need, which is why you want to interview at least 2 coaches. 3 is great. For some, that's overwhelming, but at least talk to 2 different people and figure out what your learning style is. Can you manage phone coaching, Skype coaching? Do you want to see someone in person? We have coaches all over the country and also in other countries, but definitely take your time to ask questions and know that coaching isn't about crisis management. So when you think that, wow, it would be nice to learn some skills and to build things up, do it before you reach that point of, oh my gosh, I have a week left before this work is due. Now I'm going to get a coach, because the coaching will not be effective during that short period.
Okay. Well, Jodi, one of the last questions here is, can you please invite Jodi Sleeper-Triplett back for another webinar? Pretty please.
Always. Anytime.
And thank you all. And thank you again, Jodi, so much.
Right. Thank you, Susan, for having me. Bye-bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.